So today we're going to look to assemble a still life of a fruit bowl, taking various images of pieces of fruit and incorporating into one simple design. This will give you the opportunity to practice your skills with the magic wand tool, the polygonal lasso tool, as well as possibly the object select and the quick selection tool. You can find the polygonal lasso tool located above, but the majority of the options you'll probably be using today is the magic wand. To help create this assembly, we have to start out with our bare minimum design. With the bowl and table, we want to make sure that our layers are in proper order first. Over in the layers panel, we want to make sure that we have the inside of the bowl behind the outside of the bowl. So the outside of the bowl should be appearing on top. Then we have the inside of the bowl, then the shadow, and then the background, including the table. And the majority of your pieces of fruit will go in between the outside and inside of your bowl. To begin with, we're going to be taking a look at the cherry image. You can go to File Open to open up each of the images of the fruit. And I can zoom in, Control plus sign, to get closer to see my overall image. Again, the quick selection and the object selection are not ideal for using and selecting out this object. It leaves a lot of open gaps within the design. Unfortunately, it's going to miss areas that you could easily do faster with the magic wand. So with the magic wand tool, I'm going to start by selecting out the white area, and it does a good job overall, except you can see down towards the shadow at the cherries, it's just not getting in those little white areas or those differences of color. And we also have the gaps in between the stems where they overlap and the other white areas cannot touch. So if we need to add in an area, you're going to hold down Shift, click inside those white areas, and then down for the shadowed areas, you're going to click inside those gaps, get as close as possible to the cherries. If it cuts in too much, you can always hit Control Z to undo, or I can hold down Alt on my keyboard to deselect areas that I don't want selected. Holding down Shift will allow me to select out areas that I've already selected or add in areas. But once I have the cherry selected out, we have to remember that we don't actually have the cherries and the leaf selected. We are currently just have the background, the white area selected. So we need to invert our selection. To invert our selection, you're going to go up to Select at the top navigation, go down to Inverse. Once you inverse, we now have the leaves and the cherry selected. So I want to hit Control C, and then I'm going to go over to our bowl image, and I'm going to hit Control V, which is paste. That pastes in the cherries into our image. It did a good job overall. There might be a few areas that I may want to zoom in on and clean up. Over on the bottom of the cherries, I can always go back in, use the eraser tool to erase out these edges of shadows that I may not necessarily want on the cherries. But we do not use the raster mask for this type of design because the raster mask will not convert the transparency from one file to the next. To look to scale and modify the size of the piece of fruit, we can go up to Edit at the top navigation, down to either Free Transform or Transform, where we have the option of doing Scale, and we can do Rotate as well if we want to put it on an angle. But the Free Transform will allow you to do both the Scale and the Rotate at the same time without having to switch back and forth between. But for right now, I'm just going to scale this down because we don't want our cherries to be too large. Remember, we have to make our images proportional to the real size of other pieces of fruit. So when we have a pineapple and cherries, the cherry should not be larger than the pineapple. But once I'm happy with the size, I can hit enter. And then I can go on to the next piece of fruit. Now we're going to take a look at the pineapple. I can zoom in, control plus sign. And again, we're going to use the magic wand, click on the white background, hold down shift to select out the shadow areas to add into the design. That does a great job of selecting out the white area. Now we need to invert, go select inverse, hit control C, which is copy. Go back to our bowl design, control V is paste. Now again, you can see this difference in size. We want to make sure that we deselect and switch over to the move tool. So make sure that you deselect, control D, and click on the move tool. Then you can move the object to where you need. I recommend that you place the pineapple on the outside as we're going to apply a shadow on the bottom of the object. So we want to first scale this up and go up to edit, transform, and scale. And to scale, make sure that you hold shift to maintain proportions of the object. Once I'm satisfied with the size, just hit enter. I can always again reorder my layers, and you should probably rename your layers just so you are not confused about which ones you're selecting. So cherries, pineapple, and I may want to put my pineapple behind my cherries. You can see the cherries sitting in front of the pineapple now. On to the next one, we have the apple. Again, the magic wand, select on the black background. We need to invert our selection. Select inverse. Control C. Go back to our bowl and table. Control V. This time we're going to look to place the apple relatively inside of the bowl. I can leave it there for now. We can always reorganize once we have all the fruit inside. We'll do the orange, or actually we'll wait for the orange just because it's a little bit different from the rest. The banana itself, again, we're going to use the magic wand, click on the white background, hold down shift to select the additional areas of shadow. If there's any little areas that you want to discount, remember you can hold down Alt and deselect on those areas. Or you can use the polygonal lasso tool to add in areas, or hold down Alt and cut out areas. So if this little piece of yellow is not getting selected, I can hold down Alt, and I'm going to draw around this specific area. Once I hold down Alt, I can let go as I start to draw around it. Then get back to the starting point, and you can see that it added in that selection. So now I want to invert this selection. Again, select inverse, Control C, back to our design, Control V. I want to make my bananas a little bit larger, so I'm going to go edit, transform, scale. And you also may want to think about the rotation of objects, making objects face opposite directions. So if I want to have the bananas where the stems are off to the left side, I can go up to edit, down to transform, and flip horizontally. This will allow me to be able to kind of sit it in the bowl a little bit differently, right on the edge. Or I can even rotate the image. Again, free transform will allow me to give me the rotation or scale at the same time. So I can bump it up right against the edge, make it look like it's sitting a little bit elevated inside of the bowl. Once I'm happy with it, hit enter, and then on to the next piece of fruit. With the green grapes, we're going to use the magic wand, select on the white background. Then you're going to hold shift to select in the other areas of white in between the gaps of the grapes. And then get the shadows down towards the bottom of the grapes. Once you have all the areas selected out, we need to inverse. Select inverse, Control C. Back to our bowl and table, Control V. You can see the grapes are very large, so we need to scale these down. Go Edit, Free Transform. That will allow me to rotate a little bit and then scale these down, moving my cursor right on top of the corner. Hold it down, make sure to hold Shift so it maintains proportions. And try to think about proportional scale. The grapes will definitely be a lot smaller. And I can also look to place them behind the bananas so it appears behind in the bowl. Maybe move my apple above the bananas in front. Then we have purple grapes. Same process. Magic wand, click on the white background. Make sure to get inside the gaps. You can always hit Control Z to undo. Once I have those areas selected, I need to inverse. Select inverse, Control C, back to the bowl and table, Control V. Then we need to rotate, edit, free transform. I'm going to look to fit this on the right side of the bowl. And I can lower this again behind the outside of the bowl and even behind my apple. So we're starting to build out the overall composition. We have a couple other pieces of fruit. We have the orange and the green apple. The green apple first. Again, same process, magic wand. Still need to add in the shadow at the bottom. Just click inside those areas. You'll see that it might cut into the apple, so you need to deselect or undo. And again, I can go with the polygon lasso tool, hold down Alt on a on a Windows computer, or hold down Option if you're on a Mac. And I'm going to let go of Alt and then continue to draw around the areas that I want to include into the apple design. I can see that it goes over to the other side of the apple as well. So I might as well just go around the outside edge and make sure I include all parts of the apple. Then I can connect back to where I started. It adds in the apple. We need to now inverse our selection. Select inverse, Control C, paste it in, scale it down, edit, free transform. Make sure to hold Shift, maintain proportions. I'm going to slide this to the back behind the grapes. If you're not satisfied with that location, we can always rotate, edit, free transform, or slide it down. It's up to you to figure out the layout. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same. And then finally we have the orange. Orange, again, is a little bit different because it is surrounded by other oranges. This time, unfortunately, the magic wand doesn't do a great job of recognizing the entire orange. It only selects out colored areas. The object selection, if we look at that, if I try to draw over top of the area, unfortunately it only gets another section. And then the quick selection, again, also selects out multiple areas. So instead, we're all going to use the polygonal lasso tool. With the polygonal lasso tool, I'm going to draw around the outside edge. It doesn't matter where I'm starting, but just so we can see the difference, I'm going to start up towards the top left side. I'm going to click point by point, drawing around the outside edge of the orange. Take your time. You want to make sure that you get the curves. We don't need too long of lines that end up straight and cut into the orange or leave out areas that we don't need. So you can see it better as we get to the darker area. I'm just following along around the outside edge of the orange. And then back to where we started, close up the shape. If you get confused on where to close it up, just get back to where you think it starts and then double click and it should automatically close up. Then we want to, now instead of doing the inverse, we don't have to do the inverse because we selected around the specific object. Control C, over to our bowl and table, Control V. I may want to change the location, scale it down, edit, free transform. Can rotate a little bit, scale it down, hold shift. I'm going to put it with my apple in the front. Just slide it down into the little gap. And overall, we have a good sense of fitting all the fruit. Proportional size could be a little bit adjusted on the purple grapes. So I'll go back to that, edit, free transform. Can scale these down a little bit. That way it actually reveals some of the green apple as well a little bit better. I can modify or adjust the red apple, slide it over. That way we get a better view of the grapes and the bananas. For the cherry, I could look to put it inside as well, but I'm actually going to place it on the outside with the pineapple, and we're going to look to apply shadows for the pineapple and the cherries. Again, you will have to do the shadow for the pineapple. You do not necessarily have to do it for the cherries if you decide to put them in the bowl. But for right now, I'm going to hide the cherry layer and I'm going to zoom in closer to the pineapple just so we can see the process. I'm going to find where the pineapple layer is and I'm going to create a new layer that's going to sit below the pineapple. I can see layer 2 here. I'm going to rename it Pineapple Shadow. I'm going to slide the pineapple shadow underneath of the pineapple. And then we're going to use the ellipse select tool. It's the oval shape tool. We're going to draw an oval shape at the bottom underneath of the pineapple using the width of the entire pineapple. So from the left side to the right side, the idea is that we're going to draw a oval shape that's going to make it appear as if the pineapple is sitting on the ground, just like it makes it appear as if the bowl is sitting on the table. So again, if I mess up on the lines, I can always deselect, Control D, but you can see my cursor. I'm going to click and drag over to the right side. This creates that oval shape. We want to fill this in. Go up to Edit, down to Fill. Change our foreground color to black and choose OK. And we see that we placed in the black. The most important part that a lot of designers forget to do is to deselect. So make sure that you do Control D to deselect. And now we want to blur this out to make it appear more realistic. Right now it seems more like a black hole. But to blur this out, we have the pineapple shadow layer selected. You're going to go up to Filter at the top navigation. Under Filter, you're going to go to Blur and Gaussian Blur. With Gaussian Blur, we're going to adjust the radius over to the right, and you can adjust to figure out what works best for you. It may be too stark. We can look to drop the opacity later on, but we're really just looking for the edge of the blur that we're happy with. I may want to go a little bit higher. $13 looks pretty good. And again, I can move the shadow if I need to change the location. I can adjust it down. If I lower it here, it makes it look like the pineapple's floating. So we want to make sure that we're having it sitting underneath of the actual pineapple. And if I want to adjust the opacity, if I feel like the black is too strong, I can go over to the layers panel. I have the pineapple shadow layer selected, and I can drop the opacity down so it looks a little bit more subtle overall and not so stark. If you feel like it needs other adjustments, you could possibly look to duplicate the pineapple shadow and shrink one down so you get a second shadow that's a little bit closer, more condensed. So you don't necessarily have to do this, but I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel and duplicate this layer first. Then I'm going to scale this down, edit, free transform, scale this down. I'm just going to bring it closer to the pineapple's body, and I'm going to put the opacity back up so this is a little bit stronger. If that's not enough, you can always duplicate it again. You see that we get it definitely a lot stronger now, black. I'm not necessarily a fan of that, so I can undo, get rid of that. But that shadow helps to place in the object, making it look like it's sitting on the table. We also have blend modes, which we can talk about later on, but we don't necessarily need to do that today. And again, I'll do the shadow for the cherries. For the cherries, I need to create a new layer for the cherries. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel, create a new layer, rename this layer to Cherry Shadow. Zoom in closer to the cherries. So for the cherry shadow, I'm going to move the cherry shadow underneath of the cherries layer. Then I'm going to click on the ellipse select again. With the ellipse select, I'm going to draw a oval shape underneath the cherry on the left. Then I'm going to hold shift to draw another oval shape on the cherry to the right. Now they kind of merge in the middle, creating more of a figure eight. We're going to look again to fill this in with black. Edit, fill. Black is already set in the fill. Click OK. Then again, the most important step is to deselect. Control D. We can see it sits pretty well, but we want to blur this out, make it look more realistic. So we can go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And 13 is pretty good overall, or 7.2 is pretty good overall. I can adjust it a little bit if I want, just so it's a little bit softer. And I might want to nudge the location. I can use my arrow keys if I have the move tool selected, just to make it a little bit closer to the body. And again, we can drop the opacity if need be, just to lighten it up. Now if we zoom out, we can see the overall composition. We have the pineapple and cherries with shadows. We have everything else inside the bowl, and it looks pretty good. So we're going to then save this as a PSD file and then save it as a JPEG or PNG and upload the JPEG or PNG onto Canvas.